Hey everybody, Jason Blaha with Ice Cream Fitness here. I know that I have a lot of videos up on this topic and I've kind of beaten the topic into the ground, but I just want to briefly cover the topic of glycemic index because I see new questions popping up and I've got a lot of new subscribers and a lot of you guys haven't seen some of my older videos on this topic. So I would like to just briefly cover my stance on it and kind of separate the science from the bro science for you. But hold on, let me give you guys a bicep shot first. All right, for anyone who wants further details just on the topic of insulin, I'm going to go ahead and link my insulin video right here, and I'm going to put it down in the comments below for those of you using your phones who can't click on it. All right, glycemic index comes up all the time in the fitness world, bodybuilding world, and experts try to talk about it who, when you talk to them, they can't even explain to you what the glycemic index is. They can't explain to you where it comes from or how it's measured. So we already have a problem there. And I'm not going to get into the details on that. A simple Google search will show you the mechanisms by which we measure it in the body and how it's determined. And you have to remember the glycemic index is a very contextual number. It only applies in unrealistic situations. It's not something that's particularly applicable to the real world because the way that we eat food and do feeding patterns in the real world doesn't give the glycemic index number the same way that it shows up in studies. Now, 10 to 15 years ago, nutritionists thought that it might play a role in body composition, so we studied it, and studied it some more, and it has been determined in nutritional science that glycemic index does not meaningfully impact body composition, fat gain, fat loss, or muscle gain at all. It seems to be a complete non-factor, and if you understand how insulin works and how the glycemic index is measured, it would make sense why. Now, some people are going to jump up and say, hey, what about health? Well, that's also important because for non-diabetics, glycemic index does not seem to be a health factor. And if you are diabetic, it's not a particularly useful number because of the way that we measure it. It's kind of outdated. The glycemic load is far, far more important if you're diabetic. And as to appetite suppression, people try to claim, well, lower glycemic index carbs are more satiating. Actually, the research says they're not. There have been studies that showed some low glycemic index carbs were for some people, and then other studies that showed that high glycemic index carbs were more satiating, and then other studies that show that they can't find any correlation at all between appetite and glycemic index. So the reality is there doesn't seem to be any relationship between glycemic index and satiation, at least directly, the actual numbers directly. There's other aspects to those same foods that affect it, but not the glycemic index. And on top of that, some people will try to say, oh, well, you know, more whole foods and what we consider whole foods are going to be lower glycemic index. And I will call bullshit on that also, because again, if you pull up glycemic index charts, everyone in the fitness world tries to brag about brown rice like it's a low glycemic index carb. Brown rice is not a low glycemic index carb. I'll name 4 foods for you right now that are lower glycemic index than brown rice. And brown rice is a moderate, it's not a low. And you tell me, if you're a so-called clean eater, why you aren't eating these low glycemic index foods instead of your crappy brown rice. Ice cream is usually lower glycemic index than brown rice. Pizza is usually lower. Hamburgers and French fries. Those 4 foods, all the majority of the time, have a lower glycemic index than brown rice. So if you really are concerned about lower glycemic index foods, you shouldn't be eating that moderate to moderately high glycemic index carb brown rice. But the reality of the matter is you can completely ignore it. For bodybuilding purposes and even health purposes, the science is pretty conclusive that there doesn't seem to be any benefit to even knowing the word glycemic index. It's an outdated term. It doesn't really have medical applications anymore. It doesn't seem to be a factor in health, body composition, and for people with physique goals, you can actually completely forget the word. You can forget you ever heard it because it isn't important in any way to your physique, your health, your energy, or your performance. All right, guys, I hope this has been informative, and I will talk to you next time.